Good morning. Happy Monday. Praise God. Once again, He's faithfully awakened us and given us another opportunity to walk with Him in faith, trusting in His love and His mercy and His grace. We thank God. We thank Him for our salvation. We thank Him for His love. We thank Him for providing for us. We thank God for choosing us to be the object of His love, His precious children, purchased by the blood of His Son, Jesus Christ. Thank God. Thank Him. Okay, this morning's daily devotional is titled, Determined to be Faithful. It's from the book of Genesis, chapter 39, verses 2 through 10. It says, "And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her." There will be temptations in life. They're tests to determine where our heart truly lies. Is it on being obedient to God, our Creator, or is it our own will? We're tested. We need to choose wisely. All right, this week's lesson is titled Joseph's Final Challenging Covenant Renewal. Last week, we considered Israel's treaty with the Gibeonites and the subsequent battles against the Amorite kings the Amorite kings who attacked Gibeon. This week, we fast forward to the end of Joshua's life, and his final instructions to the children of Israel. First, let's consider what happened between these two events. Joshua had led Israel through a series of strategic campaigns that resulted in the conquering of most of the land. By and large, Joshua had accomplished the conquest of Canaan. He then oversaw the appropriation of the land to the various tribes of Israel. He was now an old man, ready to go to his rest in the Lord. But before he departed, one last task awaited him. Several decades had gone by since Israel entered the promised land, as they had renewed their covenant with God before entering Canaan. In Joshua chapter 5, verses 2 through 12, it was fitting to affirm their commitment to the covenant now at the end of the military campaigns. So Joshua had one final act as the leader of Israel to remind the people of God's historical faithfulness and challenge them to remain faithful to God in the future. The book of Joshua ends on this high note, a renewal of God's covenant with his people. All right, section 1A, possessing the promised land. Joshua 23, verses 1 through 5. We'll start in verse 2. It says, "And Joshua called for all Israel, and for the elders, and for their heads, and for their judges, and for their officers, and said unto them, I am old and stricken in age, and ye have seen all that the Lord your God hath done unto all these nations because of you. For the Lord your God is he that hath fought for you. Behold, I have divided unto you by lot these nations that remain, to be an inheritance for your tribes, from Jordan, with all the nations that have cut off, even unto the great sea westward." This passage begins with establishing a time frame. The text says, a long time had passed since the Lord had enabled Israel to conquer the land. It probably took about 14 years for the entire period of conquest. After that, there were about 7 years of appropriating the land to the various tribes and their settling in. Thus, about 21 years had passed since Israel entered the Promised Land. Joshua had been born in Egypt and was probably about 40 years old when the wilderness wandering began. That would make him about 80 years old when the conquest began. So he was now over 100. And sensing that his days on earth were ending, we know he was 110 years old when he died. See Joshua 24:29. It was time to challenge Israel to reaffirm their commitment to follow God and his covenant. So Joshua called the leaders of the nation to meet with him. This probably occurred at Timnath Sarah, where Joshua lived as his appointed inheritance. See Joshua 19:50. Or this meeting may have occurred at Shiloh, where the tabernacle was located. See Joshua 18:1, and which served as the worship center for Israel. When the tribal leaders, priests, and judges had gathered, Joshua told them he was a very old man and knew his time as their leader was limited. Other great men remained robust until the time of their deaths, including Moses. See Deuteronomy chapter 34:7. But Joshua had led a hard life. He had led many military campaigns for Israel as a senior adult. His life as a warrior, military commander, and spiritual leader had worn him out. Joshua reminds these leaders of their recent history. After conquering most of the people of Canaan, he worked with them to divide the land amongst the various tribes. And that's in Joshua 23, verses 3 and 4. This division of the land is described in chapters 13 through 19. The tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh had elected to receive their inheritance east of the Jordan River. See Numbers 32:32. The other 10.5 tribes received their inheritance in the area between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan. The descendants of Joseph were so numerous that they received 2 allotments, one for Ephraim and one for Manasseh. The tribe of Levi, being devoted to God and the service of the Lord's house, received no tribal land. Instead, they were appropriated certain cities scattered throughout Israel. See Joshua chapter 20 and 21. Even though the major cities had been conquered, there were still remnants of people living in Canaan to be conquered. See Joshua 23 verses 4 and 5 and Judges chapter 1. One reason the Lord allowed some areas for future conquest was to test the Israelites, to see if they would be faithful to his decrees. Judges chapter 3 verses 1 through 4. Another reason was so the land would not become a wilderness filled with wild beasts. See Deuteronomy 7:22. However, the Lord promised Israel eventually complete victory over all the Canaanites if they would be obedient. See Deuteronomy 7:23 and Joshua 23:5. All right, section 1b, holding fast in the land. Joshua 23 verses 6 through 16. It says, "Be ye therefore very courageous to keep, to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, that ye turn not aside therefrom to the right hand or to the left, that ye come not among these nations, these that remain among you, neither make mention of the name of their gods, nor cause to swear by them, neither serve them, nor bow yourself unto them, but cleave unto the Lord your God, as ye have done unto this day." After reminding the tribal leaders about the faithfulness of God in the past, Joshua gives them instructions regarding the future. He urges them to be very courageous in verse 6. This echoes what the Lord told Joshua upon commissioning him to lead Israel in Joshua 1, verse 7 and 8. He passed God's words to the leaders of Israel. They were challenged to boldly and diligently obey the law of God. In Hebrew, there is no word for obey. The word translated as obey in the Old Testament means to hear or to heed. The people of God were told to hear, heed, and do the commands of God. That is Joshua's direction here. Do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses. Heeding implies doing, that is, obedience. Complete devotion to God was expected. The Israelites were to have nothing to do with the gods of the nations around them. Not only were they not to worship their idols, they were not even to mention their names. Adherence to God's law requires absolute obedience, with no room for any other gods. Sad to say, as we read through the rest of the Old Testament, we see that Israel failed to heed Joshua's instructions. The history of Israel is a repeated pattern of turning to other gods and rejecting the Lord's commands. As Christ followers today, we must have complete devotion to God and his word. As Joshua directed, we must cleave to the Lord and no one else. The promise of God, as given through Joshua, was if they would do this, God would give Israel total victory over their enemies. Joshua reminded them God had driven out their foes, and he would continue to do so in the future. Indeed, they would see the supernatural hand of God at work, one man chasing 1,000. How could this be? The reason was simple. God was the one fighting for them. This also is a powerful lesson for us. If we trust in God and obey his word, we can depend on his fighting for us. See Exodus 14:14, Deuteronomy 1:29 through 30, and 2 Chronicles 20:17. Joshua 23:11 gives us the primary motivation for obedience. We must love the Lord with all our hearts. God doesn't want heartless obedience. He desires sons and daughters who follow him because they love him. That is why to love God with all our hearts is the first and great commandment. And that's in Matthew 22, verses 37 through 38. There's an insert here titled Giving Ourselves to God. In our abandonment, we give ourselves over to God just as God gave himself for us, without any calculations. The consequences of our abandonment never enter our outlook because our life is taken up in him. And that was written by Oswald Chambers. Making God your main priority is work. You're fighting the flesh. You're fighting the world system. There's many things that distract you from being totally dedicated to God. And sometimes we fall short. But God has endless mercy when we repent to forgive us and to restore us to a loving relationship with him. So trust in God, even when you fall short, because he's merciful and full of grace and desires to have an intimate relationship with you based on the fact that he loves you. Thank you for your time. Have a blessed and wonderful day.